The golden age of steam. Steam locomotives were at one time a common sight on Britain's railways. This scene, for instance, filmed at a London terminus nearly 30 years ago, could be seen at almost any mainline station in Britain during that period. They still held a fascination for many people of all ages and from all walks of life. However, with the end of regular steam operation on BR in 1968, some enthusiasts turned their attention and energy to running steam locomotives on preserved railways. This developed an interest in model railways. Richard, for instance, is a young enthusiast of both model railways and steam locomotives, and is seen here at his local model railway club examining a model of a J94 saddle tank locomotive. He wonders to himself what the real thing looks like.
Takes a little while to get to know. As I say, it's all mainly controlled.
Well, here is the real thing, all 48 tons of it, looking immaculate in the morning sunshine. Number 26 Northiam, entering Tenterden Station on one of Britain's most popular preserved railways, in Cantonese Sussex, with the fireman passing over the single-line token to the signalman on the ground. Delighted to be there is Richard taking a snap for the family album, as well as his colleagues at his model railway club. By kind permission of the railway management, Richard will be given the opportunity of having a look behind the scenes of the many and varied aspects of running a steam railway. In anticipation of this, Richard tries on the obligatory engine driver's cap in the station shop. You never know. Stepping outside, he's in time to see the station master give the right-of-way to the 12:15 to Northiam. The approach to Tenterden Station is on a long incline with tight curves, requiring much effort from the engine with guaranteed pyrotechnics. The majority of the coaches on the line will be familiar to many visitors as they're ex-BR Mark I coaches, expertly restored in various liveries. Displayed on the platform is a selection of vintage luggage, a reminder of the days when virtually everybody and everything travelled by rail. Richard, meanwhile, meets his friend and railway member Paul at Rolvenden Loco Shed, and after a brief look at some of the engines in the yard, decide to make their way over to the signal box, where the signalman explains the layout and functions of the box.
I've always wanted to know, what are the actual levers for?
Well, different levers that perform various functions in the box are identified by different colours. The red ones, they are the signals themselves, the black are the points, the blue are the facing point locks, which are used to actually lock the points in a position for the passage of a train so that the points cannot move under it. And the blue and brown ones are the electric releases, which serve other purposes, such as releasing ground frames.
What are ground frames?
Well, ground frames are a small lever frame which are actually located out on the ground which a guard or a shunter would use.
Why is this particular one such a big box?
Well, the box here is one of its main functions.
Signal box staff, who belong to the section known as S&T, Signals and Telephone Section, have to go through an intensive training programme for their occupation. They're all unpaid volunteers and must learn all the rulebook regulations too. They're responsible for the safe passage of trains at all times and must spend a few years learning all aspects of safety and procedure until they qualify to be a signalman in charge of a box.
Or you have a large layout such as this that actually needs signalling.
Yeah. What about all these instruments? What are they used for? Or what do they measure?
Well, the indicators are used to indicate signals that can't be seen actually from the box, or sometimes that can't be seen easily at night. We have trains cross around every hour here, and this is because, being a single line, you need to have passing places to maintain that frequency of service. Well, in fact, shortly there'll be a train leaving Tenterden, the 2:15, which will arrive here after the up train, Northiam, has arrived, and the down train will then leave for Northiam, and once it's cleared, the up train will then leave for Tenterden.
The signalman is now able to put into practice the working details he's been outlining to Richard, with first of all the arrival of a train from Tenterden at Rolvenden Station.
These are used as the actual authority to occupy the single line section, and there can only be one of these out of the instrument at one time. Rather than just having one of them, we have a number, and they are controlled electrically between the two instruments, in order that when you have, say, two trains following, there's no need to bring one back by road in order for the second train to proceed.
Having collected the single line token from the Northiam train, the signalman then goes through the seemingly complex and muscle-building task of preparing the points and signals for the train standing in the station. The home signal is cleared and the Northiam-bound train makes a speedy exit from the station. At this point, it's worthwhile explaining the need for these safety measures of single-line working, as in the early days of railway operation over single lines, head-on collisions between two trains were quite common, often with fatal results. Eventually, men known as bobbies and equipped with red flags were employed to walk in front of trains with the rather unenviable task of protecting their train. To this day, signalmen are always known as bobbies. Meanwhile, Richard, still engrossed, watches as the signalman pulls off the home signal for the other train to enter Rolvenden Station. Department of Transport regulations require all train movements to be entered in a logbook.
What is this map diagram up here of?
This diagram shows all lines, points and signals covered by the signal box and is standard equipment in all such boxes. A little later on, the train returns from Tenterden and pulls up at the platform, despite the fact that his nearby signal has cleared, that is, it's all right to proceed. The driver, no doubt, is waiting for the single line token to be handed to him. The same train movements are repeated with the opportunity of seeing the signalman collecting the token from the fireman of the train from Northiam. This done, the first train can leave. This procedure is called trains crossing. With the departure of the train from Tenterden, the signalman changes the points for the entry of the other train. Note the operation of the point locking bar in the bottom right-hand corner of the picture. Now the signalman gives another token or key to the loco crew for safe passage on the single line up to Tenterden. On another day, there's some engine variety here, with the departure of a train from Rolvenden, double-headed by a Brighton Terrier and a Chatham P-Class loco, both vintage engines. The last carriage is of some interest, as it's reputed to have run on the district line of London's Underground a very long time ago. Also seen is number 24, making its way out of the loop line and joining the running line into Rolvenden Station. The next station down the line to be visited by Richard is Wittersham Road, which was reopened in 1978. Seen entering the station's through line is yet another engine, a USA tank. Built during World War II, these engines were shipped to Britain and were used on the Southern Railway, mainly on shunting duties. The operating procedure here is the same as at Rolvenden, and as the signalman collects the token, a colleague opens the level crossing gates. The reason for this appears in the approach of the double-headed train on its return journey to Tenterden. Wittersham Road Station is of some historical interest, as during World War II the largest rail-mounted gun in the British Army was stationed here for defence purposes. Legend has it that it only ever fired one round, promptly shattering windows for miles around. The signal box here is rather unusual in having an outside platform which appears to be very useful for handing over tokens to engine crews. Level crossing gates are necessary on these little lanes, and this railway has quite a few of them. They're strictly controlled by regulations and must be manned during train movements. Several trains passed through Wittersham Road that day, and we took the opportunity of filming most of them. The track work suffers a lot of strain and stress during a busy railway season and must be fully maintained to the highest degree. It's looked after by the Permanent Way Gang, another bunch of unpaid volunteers who make sure the locking keys remain tightly in place and the rails are the correct distance apart. Not only that, but sleepers must be replaced when necessary. Despite being a quiet station, the signal box at Wittersham Road is kept busy all day with passing trains. The last train of the day was headed by the USA tank, and in failing light and on wet rails, the engine experiences some wheel slip on pulling out of the station up the incline. The following morning sees Richard up bright and early at Rolvenden Shed in company with Adrian, one of the railway's young volunteer workers. Their task is to spruce up Linda ready for its day's work. Tasks of this kind are rarely seen by visitors to the line, and although a basic cosmetic operation, travellers using the line expect to see a clean engine on their train.
After you've done this, you use another rag to take it off with.
I see.
Engine cleaning is the first step on the ladder for any enthusiast who aspires to become a fireman and eventually a driver. Here, Adrian explains to Richard what has to be done and also explains the functions of various parts of the engine. In BR days, some of the larger loco depots used steam hoses working under high pressure to remove grease and grime from the running gear, and this was certainly a more effective way of tackling this constant problem.
What is this red thing for?
It's the connecting rod. It connects the wheels to each other so that they all go round at more or less the same speed, and if one wheel begins to spin, so do all the rest.
Right. What are you using to clean it?
It's the same mixture as we used on the wheel, just up there.
What, paraffin and oil?
Yes, right. Give it a good rub. It's the same procedure again.
Yeah. Does it get a good finish?
Should do if you do it properly.
What time did you get down here today, Adrian? What time do you have to get ready and everything?
Get up at 6:30.
6:30?
Yeah.
You do that every
Come
day?
down here at 7:45. Not every day. It's about once every week.
The upper part of the engine is now cleaned, with metal polish being used to shine up the nameplate.
It's brass nose, a type of metal polish.
This particular engine, one of the J94 class and often referred to as austerities, was previously owned by the National Coal Board and spent many years working at Maesteg in South Wales. A total of 485 were built and many have been preserved.
Do you get paid for it or not?
Having completed the task of cleaning, Richard, keen as ever, asks the driver what the lamp over the buffer is for. It is in fact for train identification, a sort of code.
What's this tube here for?
This one here.
The driver also explains the function of the vacuum brake pipe, which is for connection of the engine's brake control through the pipe to the coaches. Finally, he points out the other pipe, which is for connection of steam from the engine's boiler to heat the coaches in cold weather.
What happens if it wasn't there? What would happen?
Well, you get cold without that.
Yeah.
With this, you must have a brake through the frame. It all works on a fail-safe system anyway.
The final stage of preparation is attending to the various oiling points. An oil can with a long spout is needed, plus an agility to work in cramped spaces. Even a simple shunting engine such as this one must have efficient lubrication. There are many bearings and metal slide bars with movement hidden under the boiler, and all have to be carefully cleaned and oiled. If a bearing runs dry, it gets very hot and the surface could disintegrate. This would result in an expensive, time-consuming spell in the workshops.
For steam use, they've got a little bit of fatty oil, like stearic acid and things like that, you see, as first being made in mineral oil. Now here, you have what we call trimmings, worsted, and the peculiar attraction of the wood soaks the oil up, and then it goes down a hole in the side there, then connects up to that pipe going down there. And that lets a controlled amount of oil go down there at a very slow rate, and you can alter the rate of
The engine now moves over to the inspection pit to have a boiler blowdown to remove any scale deposits from the boiler. An impressive, if noisy, spectacle. Here, the coal bunker, which has a capacity of 2¼ tonnes, is being topped up by a mechanical tipper. In bygone days, this would have entailed coal being shovelled by hand into the bunker from an adjacent coal wagon. Dousing down the footplate with hot water helps to keep the footplate clean, especially after a coaling up operation. Richard finally makes his way onto the footplate, but there's still more work to be done. The water tank has to be filled up, and as it holds 1,200 gallons, this can take quite some time. Linda, with Richard on board, finally moves off ready for its day's work as it negotiates the road level crossing outside Rolvenden Station. This crossing is much busier. It's on the main road to Tenterden, and it has larger gates too. At Tenterden Station, with the engine coupled up to its train and some time to spare, Richard decides to have a break with his friend Paul. The attractive building in the background is the railway's restaurant and was originally located in Maidstone. It belonged to the Maidstone and District Bus Company. His friend told him the history of the Kent and East Sussex Railway. In 1900, the Ashford News proclaimed proudly that the Rother Valley Railway had opened for business, opening up the Weald, it said. Visitors could travel to Bodiam Castle, for instance. The line was built by Colonel Stevens and left the main Hastings line at Robertsbridge. Like all his other lines, the railway was built as cheaply as possible and used second-hand engines. As motor cars and buses began to compete, economies had to be made. These odd vehicles were mounted back to front on Ford chassis. Passengers had a very rough ride in them. It always was a mixed passenger and goods railway. Bodiam Castle. And across the fields comes a typical 1930s train. Note the absence of level crossing gates. The train features some interesting old six-wheeled coaches. Later, the train returns and we catch a glimpse of the fashions of the day. Moving forward to the 1950s, rare colour film shows the old loco shed soon to be demolished. The line still relied on old engines to keep the railway going. It finally closed to passengers in 1954, but a good service struggled on until 1961. A few specials were run for enthusiasts, but then BR closed down the line and the preservationists moved in, bringing some very odd locomotives with them. Members of the Preservation Society had some run-down stations to restore and a few very old coaches. Bringing the story up to date, by now a splendid carriage and wagon workshop has been built and vintage coaches can be rebuilt in comfortable conditions. Richard takes a good look at what's going on here today. This fine observation coach appears to be in an advanced stage of restoration. These carriage seats, however, will require much of the upholsterer's skill before they can be used again. Once a familiar sight on famous express trains, these carriage boards evoke nostalgic memories of an era long gone. After a pleasant interlude, Richard rejoins the footplate of Linda, setting off down the sweeping curves out of Tenterden, with Richard taking the opportunity of admiring the pleasant Kent countryside rolling by. Yet another level crossing. This one is on Cranbrook Road, and although quite a small road, does sometimes carry a lot of traffic. The train must by law stop on the way down, but has the right-of-way coming up, because of the gradient, which can be a problem in wet weather. Engines would slip badly if restarting on wet, slippery rails. Approaching Rolvenden, the train passes a siding full of engines and rolling stock, some of the items possibly awaiting restoration and overhaul. At Rolvenden, Richard decides to have a change and travels in one of the coaches, riding on the cushions, as railwaymen used to say in steam days. It has to be said that travelling on a modern coach is considerably more comfortable than the heaving, swaying footplate of a steam engine. The children find a ladybird, catching a lift. At Wittersham Road, Richard rejoins the footplate, where he's treated to the sight and sound of Linda pounding hard up the gradient. Further progress down the line sees the train crossing over the River Rother, where the bridge has a speed limit imposed on it. The bridge has been raised from its original height due to the water level of the river being increased. The end of the journey is now in sight as we approach Northiam station and also enter the county of Sussex. Several years were spent extending the line from Wittersham Road to Northiam, and the extension was officially opened to the public on the 19th of May 1990. The original track bed from Northiam to Bodiam Castle is still intact, and it's hoped one day to reopen this section. The simple ground frame here is used for operating the points and signals within the station layout. Having run round its train and now running chimney first, Linda with its train leaves Northiam on the return journey to Tenterden. Good progress is made until the train is held up at the level crossing at Wittersham Road. Further down the line at Cranbrook Road level crossing, Richard takes the opportunity of questioning the driver about the various controls, dials and gauges on the engine.
The instrument.
Well, that's the vacuum gauge, which is the vacuum for operating the brake with. The other one is the boiling pressure gauge, and the far one is the steam heating gauge. So in the winter, we put steam heat on the rolling stock to keep passengers warm. Steam pipe, so this is the brake ejector, which actually creates the vacuum to work the brake, and that's just the steam pipe. You'll find if you trace it all round. comes out of there and goes into there.
Ah.
We put the brakes on with that. At the moment, because we're light engine, we're running on a steam brake only, which is that one.
Yeah.
But normally you run on a vacuum brake. Sand it. Put sand in front of the front wheels. Don't put sand in front of the back wheels in case you get slipping on a greasy rail.
That is.
Gauge glasses tells you the level of water in the boiler.
Listen.
That's the reverser. It's like that's in backward gear if we're going backwards.
Yeah.
The other way is basically.
Yeah.
And some of the drain cops, you can vent the steam off the cylinders, or if there's water in there, you can open them and let the water drain out.
What I've driven out.
How are we?
All right.
Having worked the last service of the day, with the coaches now stabled at Tenterden, Linda, running light engine, makes its way into Rolvenden Yard to be bedded down for the night, in railway parlance.
Coming into the shed, put a sign there to stop, wait and proceed. That's just so that everybody knows you're coming.
Yeah.
Otherwise you can come roaring in and run someone over. Blue whistle.
At this point, the driver kindly decides to let Richard have a go at driving the engine, an opportunity certainly not to be missed.
And some more. Go on. And some more. Keep going.
Rather gingerly handling the regulator, Richard is rewarded by moving the engine a few yards down the track. Close by is a Brighton Terrier having some work done on its big ends. One connecting rod has already been removed, with the other one still connected. Maintenance and overhaul are carried out in the railway's own extensive workshop. Richard takes a good look at what's going on here today. Seen entering the station's through line is yet another engine, a USA tank. In the USA, these small engines were always known as switchers. Trains leaving Rolvenden heading north towards Tenterden are soon faced with a stiff climb on a 1 in 50 gradient, presenting both the engine and crew with some hard work. Linda puts on a spirited performance with Richard on the footplate, who by now is probably beginning to understand some of the basic principles of working a steam engine.
it.